Okay, so you needed to have all your tools and stuff here today because we're immediately going to jump into our first project. The first project is entitled subtraction or subtractive process. Okay, and we've got some information on that we'll give you. What I want you guys to particularly take notes on and pay attention to are the techniques that we're going to talk about for building a clean model, cutting foam core, and keeping yourself from getting cut by these things. As Mitchell said the other day, these things are really dangerous if you use them improperly, so you've got to be very, very careful with them. Okay, so one of the things that students are kind of having problems with is manual dexterity, and I think that a lot of that's come because they've removed a lot of the stuff like shop classes and art classes and stuff have been removed from high schools. And so people, really can come all the way through the high school system and never use an X-Acto knife or a box cutter knife like this. Okay? So the very first thing we're going to do is kind of learn to cut we're just going to make some random cuts onto a piece of foam core just to kind of learn what are the techniques that'll get you a cleaner cut. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a slice off of the edge of this board right here, and I think I'm just going to use the thickness of my my ruler here. I'm going to turn it around so it's facing the right direction. Okay, so the very first technique thing that I want you guys to take a note about is the way that you hold the knife. All right, so do not grab the knife like you're grabbing, a spear or something you're going to throw. You want to hold the knife so that your index finger is sort of going to push down on the front edge of it, and the rest of your hand is kind of holding it loosely back towards the back. Okay. So you have to you got to hold the knife the right way. If you try to hold it this way, it's going to be very hard to make a cut. Okay? All right. Second thing is, when you cut, all right, you've got to be aware that if you try to cut horizontally across, right, that your arm is naturally going to want to create a radius, right? So when you cut, if you're trying to cut a straight line, you want to use your elbow, right, to make a straight line. That make sense? And I watch a lot of students try to cut, they're like cutting sideways to themselves. Make sure that thing sees me, right? They're trying to cut this way, and that is very, very unnatural way, and maybe that's why they hold the blade that way, right? So you want to kind of make sure that you are pulling towards yourself, right? And that you're using the motion of your elbow and your arm to kind of keep the blade going in a straight direction, right? Next tip is the entry angle of the knife into the board, okay? So by that I mean the angle that the knife makes with the surface of the board this direction. That angle should be about 30 degrees. So if I grab my 30-60 triangle here, and here's one here. I want solid. All right. There's 30-60. The proper entry angle should be about like that. It should not be up high, right? And you got to be careful to not go down too low. Because if you go down too low, the bottom guard of the blade will start scratching and boring into your paper. Okay? All right, so that's called the entry angle. Now, the next thing that you guys have to be concerned with is the angle perpendicular to your cut. Okay? Your blade, when it's going in, right, perpendicular to the cut needs to be straight up and down. So if I was to use this here, right, you have to be at a right angle up. We're going to attempt to join pieces of foam core together. I'll grab some pieces that I have already cut here. Okay. Now, imagine the foam core has thickness, right? Imagine if I'm cutting and my knife is at an angle like this, right? When I make the cut, the dimension on the top side of the board is going to be one size, but since it's angled down, the other surface is going to be shorter. And that's one of the things that, again, creates kind of poor craftsmanship in a model. The next thing that I want you guys to be aware of is that you should not try to cut through 3/16 foam core in one pass. You should cut through 3/16 foam core in between 3 and 5 passes. Okay? So 3 to 5 passes to sever the foam core. And actually, the most important tip that I can give you for good craftsmanship in your models and cutting foam core properly is to keep a sharp blade. I have gone and I every semester some students struggle with building clean models, and at some point I finally got to I had the epiphany of asking, well, when was the last time you changed your blade? And they had gone through the entire semester and they hadn't changed their blade, and they almost had an entire blade left, which means that they'd only snapped it off once or twice. You probably want to go through one of these blades every 3, 4, 5 days or so of like intense modeling, right? You want to be snapping the blade off very regularly to keep the blade sharp. So, all right, so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and try to put into practice all of those things. So for starters, I'm going to stand up and look down at the board, right? I'm going to make sure that I am pulling towards me. I am going to do about a 30-degree entry angle, right? So is that about 30? I'm being very careful that this direction I don't curve the blade, that it is actually straight up and down. All right? And I'm going to kind of come across, and I'm just barely scoring the paper just a little bit. That's 2 passes. That's 3 passes. And just to prove it to you, it's not severed. 3 passes, I still haven't got all the way through. I'm taking my time, cutting slowly and in increments. Okay? So this will be the 4th pass. And I can actually hear the paper down below. You'll actually hear different sounds as the blade goes through. When it's cutting through paper, it makes more of a hissing sound. When it's cutting through the foam core, it's more of a dull sound. So, you
can hit a cutting board once you...
Yeah, once you hit the cutting board, then it makes more of like you're cutting through like a rubbery surface. Now, it did sever. It took about 5 passes. Okay? And I'm going to just cut this thing off right here. Okay? And I want you guys to kind of look at it. There's no tear outs, right? It's nice and smooth. There's no defects whatsoever in it, right? That's what you want to strive for. If you use those techniques, right, you should be able to produce something like this. All right? So I'm going to stop the video. That'll be the first one. How many minutes does that say?
9.